So welcome everybody to the Fasting for Vitality Introduction Masterclass. Let me let one more person in. We're really happy to have you. So tonight, you're going to find out all about the benefits of fasting and a few other things. We're also going to talk about the common challenges and misconceptions. So let me open up this PowerPoint that I'd like to share with you. Okay. Can everyone see the screen? If you can just give me a... Okay, perfect. Excellent. So now let me go through this. We just want to give a quick introduction. I'll let Karen start.
Hi. I can see that I know quite a few people on the call, which is fantastic, and a couple of people from my previous practice. So it's so cool to see you. I'm a medical doctor trained at Cape Town, and I'm now working and practicing in private practice in Mauritius. I'm not a normal medical doctor in the sense that I do GP work, but my postgraduate training is something called lifestyle medicine. So I look more at how people live and how their lifestyle impacts on their disease risk, so that we can optimize and prevent any complications in the future. I also do a little bit of aesthetic and anti-aging medicine, which helps people look their best, and that helps them feel good. And on the side, I am a Zumba instructor, so I teach group fitness as well. So it's kind of like, I like to promote health and well-being and overall happiness. And I must just tell you that working with Lindsay has been one of the most fantastic blessings in my life. She is so smart and super clever, and you are all in for a treat tonight, because the information that you're going to get is fabulous. So I hope that you all enjoy the session. And please, if you've got questions, if there's anything that you are unsure about, write it in the chat and we'll try and address those as we go.
Thank you. That was a surprise. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. So now for me, I am a nutrigenomics counselor. And actually, before I talk about me, just to add one more thing to Dr. Karen, I have to say this not because she gave me a compliment, but also because I've been through many doctors in my life and have worked with some as well. And she has the best combination of being progressively minded, a wealth of information into the updated studies, has really good bedside manners, and is very diverse and well-rounded and just a pleasure to work with. And not only that, I mean, you guys are going to benefit a lot because she's always got a good answer for everything. So anything you have a question for, she's got a good answer for. So I'm very happy to be working with her and happy for you guys to be a part of this tonight. And as for me, I'm a nutrigenomics counselor and health coach. And so basically I do generally a mind-body reset. I personalize people to get healthier, and I use a tailored approach, like looking at someone's DNA and also really understanding what makes them tick, because from a stress perspective, I like to help people get them from where they are to where they want to be efficiently. This is really important to do it efficiently, and because we're all very busy. And I also work with hormones and help people lose weight, eat better. And I'm also working on a different project right now for helping women to embrace getting older. So that's a separate thing on the side. So with that said, we will go ahead and get into the nuts and bolts of tonight. Let me just make sure that my mouse is working properly. Okay, so I have a quick question for everybody. What are your fasting challenges? I'd actually like if you could enter them in the chat. We will be asking questions also at the end. But if anyone has struggled with fasting in the past, or you have some reservations about fasting, like I did, I totally was against it. My mom told me when I was growing up, our whole family has low blood sugar. We shouldn't be fasting. We should be eating all the time. There's a cultural conditioning as well. So I never skipped a meal, never. And if I did, I would be in the mindset of I'm gonna crash, or I have a headache, or there was like this whole nocebo effect coming along with it. So I definitely was a late comer to fasting, but because of all the studies, I was really convinced. And then also I put it into practice, and I've done things putting it into practice the wrong way, and then I learned the right way. And that's why we are going to teach that with you, not only from my learnings, but also from what the updated studies are showing, what is happening in clinical, with the clinical experts as well, when they've started fasting with their patients, and then what has been happening with my clients and Dr. Karen's patients as well. So I just need to check if I can see the chat now. I don't think anyone put anything in the chat yet. Okay, cool. Couple of things. Cooking and looking at my family, eat while I sip chamomile tea. Okay. Food temptations when I'm out. Okay. So yes, so give me more of these types of challenges or any reservations you have. So food temptations. This is an interesting one that I don't think we have planned to address, but I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about it now. One of the things that we do in our course, cravings, worried that I'll get hungry, having a sugar low. Okay, cool. Cravings is similar. We're going to discuss getting hungry. So just a couple of things to address with the temptations and cravings. One of the things that we do, oh, I'm hearing some feedback. If everyone could just check that you're on mute. Knowing how long to fast.
Sorry.
Okay. It happens. Don't worry. Okay. So one of the things that happens with fasting, if we're doing it the right way, you build up very slowly so you don't get too hungry too fast. And the other piece is when you've had the right food before you fast, and you have the right meal to break a fast, you actually don't feel as much of a strong craving as if you've had the wrong type of food and your blood sugar is kind of up and down and in this heavy period of volatility. And so that's one of the reasons. Another one is that when you're out and about, we also teach you how to eat the right way so that you are listening to your body. And the more you're listening to your body, you're adding in the good foods, the less you're going to want the foods that don't serve you. I'm just still hearing feedback. If everyone can mute, please.
Thanks, Eva.
On the bottom left, I'm just trying to check if I can see who's not muted. I cannot tell. Can anyone see? I'm just, because I think I can mute. Give me just a second. All right, I think it's quiet now. All right, so I don't know if Dr. Karen, you have anything to add for the cravings and temptation?
I think you've summed it up very well, is particularly if you have foods that spike your insulin production. So these are sugars and processed carbohydrates in particular, then that will drive your appetite later. And this is one of the things that we focus on quite a lot in our course, is how to get good control of your insulin metabolism so that you can go for longer periods of time without feeling hungry, and so that you can combat those cravings. And I think that also speaks to this question of hitting a sugar low, is that physiologically, our bodies are made to keep our blood sugars in a very, very good, tight control, unless you're type 1 diabetic or you're on some glucose medication. But it's very, very, very rare for a person who is not being treated for diabetes to have a low blood sugar level. And if you can get on top of your insulin metabolism, you don't get that sensation of low blood sugars, even if you're fasting for prolonged periods of time.
Yes. So now I'm going to actually come on this, because I think a lot of people, they don't fast because they think they always feel hungry, and then they have blood sugar lows. And this is the number one reason why I didn't fast for a long time. I actually thought everyone has, because I do believe that each person is different, each person is unique, and we do tailor to each person. And I have this belief that just some people aren't meant to fast. Some people shouldn't fast at all. And Dr. Karen will talk about the history of fasting, but there's so many benefits that really showcase why fasting is actually healthy for everyone, but not everyone should probably fast the same amount of time, the same frequency, or even have the same schedule. So even when the person said earlier with the challenges, the temptations when I'm out, part of this is if you know you're going to be out at an event, then it may not be the best time to fast. It may be better to switch the schedule up that day or adjust your schedule. So there doesn't have to be a set time. On the internet, there's lots of fixed regimens, and we give flexibility, but we also give guidance on one to follow. But there is flexibility around this, and that's why it's really important to listen to your body, and that's also part of what we teach in our course. When I say course, I mean because we also have an 8-week fasting course that we'll talk about at the end. But tonight you're here to learn the benefits, so we'll go into this. But I just want to talk about the misconceptions at first. So this blood sugar low, actually, when a lot of my clients start fasting, I even have clients that have told me they have to eat every 2 hours. I have many people say this. They write in the form that they have to eat so often. Even just eating a few times per day versus the 6 that they were eating, because there was a lot of, there was a huge movement of people eating multiple times a day. And a lot of this started with the snacking industry. Let me just check the chat. The snacking industry, a few decades ago, they actually started promoting all of these, all of the reasons why people should eat multiple times a day. And they said you speed up your metabolism and all of this stuff. And there is not evidence supporting this like we thought there was. And so there is a huge misconception that we have to eat multiple times. So when my clients even just move from 6 times to 3 times a day, and they get on this schedule of doing that, they actually feel like they can go longer without food, and their blood sugar does stabilize. But we need to eat the right foods. For example, if you eat a kind of a carb heavy meal, your blood sugar will go up more than if you eat, a healthy plate, which is what we'll cover. And then once it goes up higher, it actually goes down lower. And so when your blood sugar goes to this really low trough, you're going to be hungry and crave again. So we got to kind of stabilize it with the types of food, and also with extending the amount of time little by little so that you can get adjusted to it. And we'll talk about this. Good. There was a question about, is fasting okay with thyroid disorders? And as long as you're supervised by a doctor, and luckily Dr. Karen is in this program. So that's part of it, because sometimes we have people that have some conditions that it is good to have some supervision. Fasting is abuse. So some people feel that it is torture not to eat for the same reason above, but I just had to put this as a separate one because there's actually some benefits in our body that when you, let me just add one more person in. When you fast, you are creating a mild stressor, just like when you exercise. And this mild stressor is part of this concept called hormesis. When you put a mild stressor, it actually gives the body, heightens the defenses so that it protects itself, so that it repairs. So it is not a net, it's actually a benefit to the body, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I know it may seem like abuse if you've maybe fasted the wrong way, but when you fast the right way, we've done this program a couple of times, and if everyone kind of adheres to this slow progressive pace and eating the right foods, there's really positive feedback, and they don't feel like it's abuse. On the contrary, they feel more clear and more energy. My mouse today is getting stuck. 16-8 is the only way to fast. So this is like the most common way that we've heard of people fasting. So that basically they've been told that they can eat within an 8-hour window, and then they fast for 16 hours. that is not the only way. And in studies, there's so many different ways to fast that give benefits. So we'll go through some of those as well. One other thing that I didn't put on here, but I've heard about in someone mentioned to me, is that the word fasting is difficult to hear. It feels like there's a negative connotation associated with it. So they like to call it time restricted eating or time restricted feeding, because it actually doesn't make them feel like they're torturing themselves. So this is another way. And if this person is on, if you want to add any more to that, you feel free. Fasting from Google. So we get a lot of information from Google, and a lot of it has really good sources. So sometimes we're getting fasting information that's in bits and pieces, and it may not be from full clinical trials or what's been passed. I mean, you know how the telephone game, things get passed along, and it may not be scientifically valid. So it's really important to just check the sources of things that you're getting information from. I Google stuff all the time, and so not all the time I check sources. So it really just depends on what we're looking at. But my studies they've done studies of my studies, and they're not a good predictor of human studies. So they are a good predictor when you're looking at toxicity. I think it's like 70% accuracy. But when you're looking at all other things other than toxicity, we can't really glean if it's going to be, or predict if it's going to be working the same in a human. So today I'm actually going to share with you some of the results that we get from human clinical trials. Not all the fancy stuff that we've seen in mice yet, because that has to be proven in people. Let me just check the chat. Oh, Jen said, yeah, that's me. The word fasting really bothered me. So now I call it time restricted eating. I will be eating just within an eating window. Okay, cool. Because that sometimes makes people feel better. They don't feel like it's torture. I remember my dad did it for religious reasons when I was young, and I was like, so you just don't eat? And I remember I must have been like 7 years old, just completely confounded by the fact that he would just fast for spiritual reasons. But now I'm on board. Okay. I will crash when fasting. This relates to the top one above. So a lot of people believe that they're going to crash, get a headache, have symptoms because they've heard other people have them. And that is actually part of the symptoms that are associated with what they call a keto flu or ketogenic flu. And we'll talk about this. We do sometimes go into ketosis when you're fasting, even if you're not eating a ketogenic diet. And it has some great benefits because you're burning fat. But if you go too fast, too quickly, there can be a crash, and we'll chat about this. Dr. Kassem will cover this in a bit. Let me just see the chat. Can I change my intermittent fasting schedule often? Some days skip dinner and some days skip breakfast. Yes. So we chat about this more in our course, but there's ways to figure out what works for you. But yes, you can. It's nice to have a little bit of variability. You don't have to do the same thing all the time. But the body rests when we're not eating. And we'll chat a little bit more about this. Some people think they won't get results, or maybe they've tried to fast and they actually didn't get results. They've tried for a little bit of time. And most of the time, the reason is a few things. One, they need to progressively go through it, because if they try it a couple of days, they don't get results, the body hasn't kicked into the fat burning mode yet. It takes sometimes a few weeks to get into the fat burning mode. And it doesn't mean you have to fast every day for a few weeks, but it does take time to adapt. And I think, Dr. Karen, if I'm not wrong, like a lot of the people in our previous courses started losing weight about halfway through. But it really just depended on their starting point. Yeah, okay.
And weight, I think this is an important point, is that weight is not the only goal. Obviously, for a lot of people, weight loss is the aim of the game. But for a lot of people, there are other things like inflammation and your metabolic markers that we want to improve, and generally how we feel. So, there are other results that one can achieve that are independent of weight and weight loss.
Yeah. And Jen said that it really does take time. It took her a good 6 to 8 weeks to see noticeable changes. And a lot of people think it's just a fad diet, which it did come up into popularity in the last several years. The way that I look at it is that it is, and it sounds, oh, I'm just going to admit someone else into the group. The way that it sounds, it's like it is a fad diet, but it is a lifestyle at the end of the day. And so I think what's really nice about it is that you don't have to count calories or restrict your food. You can just go with periods of time where you're actually not eating. And you can do this. Some people in this program, if they've lost the weight they wanted to, then they just go into kind of a sustainability mode. Maybe they'll fast once a week. Some will fast a few times a week, 16 hours. Some do one day a week, 1 meal a day. There's all sorts of scenarios that you can do, and we find what's the right thing for you through the course of the fast and through the course of the course, if that makes sense. All right. So intermittent fasting, what is it?
So intermittent fasting is really where you have a eating window, exactly like was mentioned in the chat, which is generally shorter than what most people do in their day-to-day lives. And then you have a period of time where you are not eating for a particular period of time. And like we kind of accept that 12 hours would be classified as fasting, which kind of follows the normal natural rhythm of how we are made and how our bodies have adapted. Because remember, we've evolved over a period of time, and with the normal cyclical routine rhythm of nature, that you have sunshine hours and you have nighttime hours, and your metabolism certainly does adjust to that. And we've seen that particularly for people who are either night owls or early morning rising people, that their eating window should correspond to their more natural, sort of active and happier times of the day to achieve the best results of their fasting. So it has got a kind of rhythmic, let's say, basis for it. But essentially, it's eating within a certain period and not eating within another period of the day. And there's a lot of history behind fasting. Most of the major religions have got some kind of fasting included in their rituals or their routines. And I think this has some adaptation or some, basis in the fact that there were times when we had plenty and there were times when food was difficult to come by. And so our metabolism and the way that our bodies work has adapted to that. And for most of the religious practices, it's more of a spiritual kind of experience where you develop empathy for people who maybe have less than what you do. But from a physical and a physiological perspective, there is definitely a healing and significant benefit to fasting that we've seen over the centuries when we've had times where there's been famine and times when there's been food plentifulness. We've seen, for instance, that during times of war, people who survived, for instance, the concentration camps, actually had longer lifespans because we think of the fact that they had restricted calorie intake for a prolonged period of time. So it's quite interesting to see that if your calories are reduced, you can potentially actually live longer. And even Plato agreed that fasting was useful for physical and mental efficiency. And there's quite a lot of increase in fasting as a tool for health. So we've seen more and more research coming through recently on the additional benefits that one has. As we've mentioned, obviously, weight loss is one of the more topical things, but that we're looking at mental function, we're looking at healing, we're looking at anti-cancer, even anti-aging benefits. And I personally use it quite a lot as a prescription for my patients for certain conditions, because there's a lot of evidence that it helps for a number of medical reasons.
Yeah.
And I know Lindsay uses it a lot as well.
Yeah.
So I'd like to introduce you to one of my patients. She came to see me in the course of last year, and I saw her recently again, and she said to me the most beautiful thing. She said 5 words that I said to her had changed her life. And those 5 words were, have you tried intermittent fasting? So she's a 46-year-old flight instructor, so quite an active lady. When she came to see me, she was struggling with her weight. She had a weight of about 109 kilograms, low energy, tiredness, and her main complaint was that she'd been suffering for years, actually, with severe lower back pain, and she had quite a lot of osteoarthritis, degeneration in the joints of her hands and her knees. And on her blood work, she had very, very high inflammation markers. So we chatted about what, her lifestyle interventions could be. So that was in November of 2020. And I saw her in May, and from 109 kilograms, her weight had decreased to 85.6. She was walking 3 kilometers 3 days of the week, could climb stairs with no pain. She'd come off her medications because previously she was taking a lot of painkillers, anti-inflammatories, quite miserable. And all of her blood markers were back to normal. So the physical effects were quite dramatic for her. And like I said, she said that intermittent fasting had changed her life. And in particular, she said to me, it was not difficult. And that, I think, is a very important key as well, is that it's actually not that hard now and then to skip a meal. Because number one, it's quite convenient, it's quite flexible, and then you can have your treats and things during the times when you are eating. So this is something that people have said to me over and over and over again, is that it's not a diet. I don't feel like I'm deprived, and it's actually quite easy to do, which is fantastic. So she's one of my heroines of intermittent fasting.
Yes, that's it. It's great results. I think someone else in the chat also said amazing results as well. And we do see this a lot, that when we work with people who are fasting, they can lose weight. Now, it depends on how much you're fasting. Let me just check someone else into the waiting room. It depends on how much you're fasting or how long. And I think that was a question earlier by someone, how long to fast. I mean, that is one of the reservations or challenges to know how long to fast. And one of the best things that we do is kind of work our way up. There are certain kind of end limits, and we will chat about that towards the end of this call. Okay. So just if everyone can put themselves on mute, it would be great, because I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. Okay, so now I just want to talk about why diets don't work. So we talked about, even Dr. Karen said, for calorie restriction, there is a lot of benefits in general, not only in mice, but in human studies. There's a lot of benefits in restricting calories for extending lifespan. And when they look at diets, though, for example, the type 2 group of people with type 2 diabetes reduced their insulin when they have a very low carb diet. A standard diet obviously has a higher amount of carbs. And then fasting reduces it even more. And the idea, especially for a type 2 diabetic, is they don't want to have these insulin increases. So when we reduce insulin, that actually is the key, literally the key to, well, I should say figuratively, the key to losing stored fat, but it is literally also because it's opening up the cell to release the stored fat. So it's not about calories in and calories out. So there's definitely a benefit for fasting over a regular calorie restricted diet.
So this is an illustration of how insulin works. And if you look at the image, the blue is one of your body cells, and each of your body cells has got a membrane around it. And attached to that membrane is a little channel. So it acts as like a drawbridge for glucose to come from the bloodstream into the cell. And insulin, like Lindsay said, works as a key. It opens that channel in the membrane of the cell, allowing blood sugar to move from your blood into your cell. And within the cell, it can then be used for two functions. It's either going to be used for energy, so that's obviously the metabolism of the cell, or if you're doing physical energy, it will be released for physical activity, or if the cell doesn't use that glucose, it goes into storage. So the moral of the story here is that if you've got a large amount of glucose outside your cells, your body will naturally respond with a higher amount of insulin, pushing that sugar into the cell. And your cell has to work pretty hard to then burn all that sugar off, which is unrealistic. So any excess glucose gets stored as fat. So insulin works as the storage hormone for fat. And the inverse is also true. If you can lower your insulin level, then your body becomes much more efficient at burning fat, and it will want to store fat much less readily. And this is one of the key results that we see when we do fasting, is that it very, very quickly reduces your insulin level. So your potential to store fat reduces very, very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so bariatric surgery, if those that don't know, it's the surgery that they use to actually remove part of the stomach so that a person cannot actually eat very much. And it has very good results in terms of weight loss, but there's also a lot of side effects. So when they've compared fasting to bariatric surgery, they see that actually it has better weight loss and blood sugar levels than bariatric surgery, and then you don't have all of those side effects. This is really important.
I think this is one of the most remarkable results that I've seen, because, you know, it's very hard for people to lose weight. And once you reach a particular level of weight, you know, the super obese category, the chance of you being able to lose weight through lifestyle interventions alone is very, very small. So for a fairly large proportion of people who are very, very overweight, the only option that we've had in medicine so far has been surgical. And like Lindsay said, surgery in patients of that size is generally very high risk. So infections and bleeding and recovery times are long, etc. So to have an alternative that gives you the same or better results, but without the risks, is phenomenal. And this is really one of the things that I see as the most powerful benefit for a lot of people.
Yeah. And as Dr. Karen said earlier, not everyone wants to lose weight. And so there are ways you can fast without losing weight. Sometimes, like, some people eat an extra dinner, for example, just so they don't lose weight. So it's not always about weight loss if that's not what you're looking at this for. So now let's talk about human clinical trials versus regular diet. So a lot of these studies were based, they looked at comparing to a regular diet. Most of them did. So the first one is weight loss. And So there are multiple human clinical trials that have that. I do have some stats and studies, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of them, but they did lose more weight than they had a regular diet. Same with insulin resistance, cholesterol, and triglycerides. Those markers improved over doing a regular low-calorie diet. Longer menstrual cycles, which is a sign of longevity. When the cycle is longer, the women that fasted had longer menstrual cycles over those that had a regular diet. Reduced breast cancer risk. Now, this study wasn't done versus a regular diet, so this is one exception, but there were 2,400 women in an 11.5-year study that reduced the reoccurrence of breast cancer just by fasting 13 hours a day. This is compared to the other group who fasted just 11 hours. So that extra 2 hours made a difference. And so what you can see is that you don't always have to fast for extended periods. Sometimes just extending it by a couple hours is beneficial. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't even fast 12 hours. I was one of those. So I would have a late night snack and then I would eat breakfast with my kids at 6 or 5:30 or whatever it is. So I would only go like 8 hours without eating. And that's actually not enough time for the body to rest. And I feel much more energized when I am extending this to at least a 12-hour window. Also in this study, all the women were drinking coffee. So they have not done head-to-head studies of fasting with coffee versus fasting with no coffee. But many of the studies, people are drinking coffee and they're still getting the benefits. So the verdict is still out as to whether it's better or not. But for now, it is completely fine with the studies. Retain muscle. So this one's quite interesting because when you're reducing your calories, oftentimes people actually lose muscle mass. And the beautiful thing with fasting is if you're doing it the right way, you can actually keep your muscle. And when you actually keep your muscle mass, you're not slowing down your metabolism. Whereas they do find that the metabolism can slow down when you do a regular diet, but with fasting, it doesn't because your insulin is so low that it's not allowing the metabolic rate to change. Let me just check the chat. Concerning insulin, I normally take a protein shake after my workout. However, that entails an insulin spike. Is that okay as long as my consumption is within my eating window? So if you're fasting and you're exercising, after you exercise, that's generally a good time to break the fast, especially if it's a carb workout. If it's a more than a 1 hour workout and it's a cardio workout. That's what I was looking for. So that's when it's good to break the fast with food. If you're doing weight training, you don't necessarily have to break your fast afterwards. And yes, protein or any type of amino acids or anything like that does cause an insulin spike. Is it okay as long as my consumption is within my eating window? Yeah, it's fine. But ideally, we have a plate that's designed because protein by itself is probably not the best way to break the fast. Is over the 13-hour fast then going into autophagy? Ooh, we're going to get to that. So let me speed this up so we can get to answer that question. Improved memory. So a lot of people do report that their memory is improved because the body is diverting all of its energy. Instead of digestion, it's diverted to actually doing other useful things. And decreased inflammation and oxidative stress. So these are just general inflammatory markers that they look at and they see that the inflammation goes down. And oxidative stress is like your apple turning brown. So it's damage to the cells and they see less damage when they measure this. So there's a lot of really good benefits. Improved mood and airflow with asthma patients. So they've done studies specifically for these patients. And all of these fast, these are the types of fasts that were done in the studies here. So some were 16-8, the breast cancer one was 13 hours. Some do a 5-2 and we go into more detail about the different types of fasts, but the 5-2 is actually where they've they eat normally for 5 days and then they fast on 2 days. So you don't have to necessarily count calories, but you do fast for a certain amount of hours on those days. And alternate day fasting, 1 day fasting, 1 day eating. And it doesn't mean that they're fasting for 24 hours, but they are fasting for part of those days. So all of this falls under the umbrella of intermittent fasting. So it doesn't have to be one type. Now we're getting to the benefits. So this is the exciting part, and it's already 8:15. So burning fat, that's the first one. This one's fascinating because we're losing calories, but you are getting what they call a metabolic switch. So you're switching from burning sugar, because normally when we're eating and we're moving, or we're doing anything, we're sleeping, we're thinking, whatever it is, we are burning sugar. We're burning our food. And then we've got this extra storage in the liver called glycogen that's got this extra glucose. And that is what we're burning the whole time. If you're fasting long enough, you actually start to burn fat, and that's when you release fat from the cells. Remember, when your insulin goes low. So one of the things that I look at is, or I like to use, is a deep freezer analogy. Basically, if you, during times of COVID, when we weren't filling our fridge as much, or, and other people have an empty fridge, then when the fridge is completely empty, that's when we access the deep freezer. And that's analogous to our glycogen stores of glucose in our liver. So when we've depleted all the glucose in our blood sugar from food, and we've depleted the storage in our liver, then the body starts to access its fuel from the deep freezer, which is our cells, and that's our fat in our cells. So it's actually burning the fat because it's already depleted everything else in the blood and in the liver. And so when we've depleted all of that, we're burning fat. This is why fasting works, because if you're always eating a little and you're restricting calories, you're never fully emptying that 100%. And when you're not fully emptying, then it's never really going to access the fat as well as it would with fasting. Okay, improve insulin sensitivity. So this one we see all the time in studies, and people who have diabetes, PCOS, Dr. Karen calls it PCOS, and in weight loss. So this is pretty consistent benefit here. Enhanced energy levels. So people reportedly do have more energy, and on the contrary, I expected that I would have lower energy, but people start to see that they do have enhanced energy level, and the brain loves ketones, and ketones fuel the brain pretty well. So this actually does give this mental clarity that a lot of people reportedly have after fasting for some time. Reduced inflammation. So someone asked, what about drinking ketones? So the only time when ketones are really recommended to consume is when you're moving from burning glucose to burning fat. So whether you're going into fasting or ketogenic diet, and there's this transition period where Dr. Karen will show you a slide where people aren't getting the energy from glucose, and if they fast too quickly, they're not getting it from fat yet either. And that's when people take what they call exogenous ketones, or extra ketones that their body doesn't make. If you fast the right way, you don't need to take those. But that's if you want to go really quickly, then you need to take these extra ketones. Improve digestive health. When the body rests from food, it actually just slows down and starts to repair. And a lot of people who have IBS, leaky gut, intestinal permeability, and any gut-related issues, they tend to find a lot of benefit from fasting, and their stomach actually rests and repairs, even if they're not changing their food. So there's a lot of benefit here. This is one of my favorites. Anti-aging, autophagy, cellular regeneration. So I'm a huge proponent of enhancing health span and longevity. And autophagy is a really cool process, because what it does, it basically means that the cell is eating itself. So your flabby skin, your cancer cells, not that everyone has this, but any flabby skin, cancer cells, viruses, any damaged cells, they get repaired during this process. And it takes a while for that process to kick in, because all of the energy is really spent on digesting food. And as soon as that process is finished, then they go to repairing cells. So a lot of people, when they're fasting, they lose that flabby skin a lot faster than those who are doing this calorie restricted diet, and they diet really quickly, and then they have all this flabby skin. So really a beautiful process that it's like a cleanup. And I put the water bottle analogy here. If I were drinking water and left this amount every single day, and then just kept filling it up, there would probably be some really old water in there after a while, because I never really cleaned it out. And so autophagy is like a cleanup. It is really cleaning everything out. And that's what fasting does as well. Reduce chronic disease risks. So not only diabetes, but even Alzheimer's, they see that when you're fasting, there's this protein called BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotropic factor. And what it is, it's a fertilizer for the brain. And when you've got more of this fertilizer, you're actually preventing what they call beta amyloid plaque, which develops a lot, and it's very prevalent in Alzheimer's patients. This actually blocks the brain from creating new synapses and new connections. And so we want that to be cleared out, and we want that fertilizer for the brain to be working, and fasting enhances this. And there's many other chronic disease risks that are reduced because you're reducing inflammation and oxidative stress, which are kind of the roots to having a lot of chronic diseases. These processes, if they're very high, then that's when chronic disease begins. Did I miss anything, Dr. Karen? Covered. Okay. Yep. And enhance mental and spiritual health. So I think Dr. Karen covered this earlier on the spiritual side, and we talked about it in energy levels. There's a lot of enhanced ability mentally. You get that clarity if you're doing fasting the right way, because otherwise, if it's the wrong way, you can get the brain fog. So, and that's where you go, you have a gap in moving from burning blood sugar for fuel to burning fat for fuel. And if you go too fast, too quickly, you won't have any fuel. And this is when you have all sorts of side effects that people can get. The other thing that's mentally interesting that I find is also it creates increased stamina. So when you know that you can fast for a while, especially from someone like me who really didn't believe I could fast, once you know that you can, and you're not going to die, you're not going to have a huge crash. It does create some, and I think the religious fasts already do this, because you do this every year or in certain or regular intervals. You do feel that you have more stamina mentally to be able to handle certain things, and even physically.
So this is a graphic that shows us what happens in our bodies during a fast. And it's a very useful graphical presentation, because if you understand this, then you get the concept of that metabolic switch, where you change over from burning glucose to ketones. So if you follow the light blue line, which is your blood glucose line, you'll see that initially, because now you're not eating, your blood glucose level does drop down a little bit, and then it kind of stabilizes, but you'll notice that it stays within the normal range throughout the period of fasting. And here they've gone for 24 hours. Now, as your glucose level is dropping, your insulin level, which is the purple line, is also dropping down. And that makes perfect sense, because there's less sugar, you need less insulin to drive that sugar into the cells. Your glycogen, which is the storage, like Lindsay's fridge, of glucose supply also tends to deplete quite quickly, and that usually in most people will be depleted after 12 hours of fasting. And it's usually between 10 and 12 hours that once your glycogen stores are completely empty, there's not much circulating glucose around. Now your body says, I need an alternative energy source. And it's at that point where your body will access the deep freeze and start burning fat. And the energy molecule of fat are your free fatty acids and your ketones. And these are the things that your body cells can use for energy. And you can actually convert some portion of fat to glucose, which is what maintains your blood sugar level at its normal level. But that will primarily feed your brain, and the ketones will feed the rest of your body and keep you happy. So that metabolic switch typically happens around 10 to 12 hours. And so usually we'll say in order for you to derive the benefit of fasting, you need to go for at least a good 12 hours of not eating so that you can achieve that metabolic switch. And this is also a very helpful physiological slide because it looks at a much longer time span. So you'll see the graph at the bottom is in days and in weeks. And what this indicates is your brain's adaptation to using different fuel. So our brains generally are used to using glucose as the primary source of energy. And they also have to kind of adapt to using ketones as the primary energy source. And that doesn't happen just overnight. Your body has to adjust to that. And like Lindsay mentioned earlier, if you go too hard and too fast, that's when you feel the brain fog. You might experience a lot of side effects, headaches and tiredness and the keto flu. So it usually takes a couple of weeks for you to go from your glucose metabolism to your use of ketones for your brain energy. And you can see on the graph, usually by about 3 weeks, that's when your ketone levels are nice and high and persistently high, and your brain has switched over to using those for fuel.
Yeah, I find this one very fascinating because that's part of the reason why fasting progressively and going up slowly really does help. Now, this is also a really cool slide.
So here you can see hour by hour the benefits that fasting has for your body. So initially we know your blood sugar, your insulin levels decrease, but by about 14 hours, you start burning fat and using fat for energy, and you have a release of something called human growth hormone. Now, human growth hormone used to be like the anti-aging hormone. When we discovered it, we thought, wow, this is going to revolutionize medicine. It didn't really do that, but it is still a very, very useful thing for you to have physiologically in your body in high levels, because that is what preserves your bone density and it's what preserves your muscle mass during a period of fasting, and very, very helpful as an anti-aging hormone in the system. And that increases at a good peak after about 18 hours of fasting. It's usually about 18 to 20 hours when you'll start to have that autophagy kick in. So one has to be a little bit more persistent to have the body's cleanup processes. And this is really where the sort of anti-cancer benefit also comes through, and the powerful anti-inflammatory benefits are when you start to have autophagy. And by about 36 hours, that is where you have a peak in that physiological process. And after about 48 hours, now we're talking prolonged fasting, then you'll actually have increased what we call cell turnover, where your cells start replicating at a higher level to try and maintain your body in a good homeostatic kind of a state. So this is a very, very useful diagram to understand as you progressively go through a fast, where are the benefits that you are going to see.
Yeah. Okay. So who should not fast? Pregnant and nursing women. So we don't even recommend a 12-hour fast. So it's really important to make sure that, you know, if you are breastfeeding or you're pregnant, it's better to wait to fast because the body does need certain levels of nourishment at this time. Newborns and children. So a lot of children already do 12-hour fast. And that's probably pretty good, but I wouldn't do any time restricted feeding with children. High intensity athletes, so extended, and you know, if you're doing intense daily training, it does require more calories and a larger eating window. So it is important to, I wouldn't fast in these scenarios. However, if you're doing training and you have some training days and some days where you're not training, you can work around it. And if your exercises, cardio exercises are within an hour, you know, you can fast, but if it's more than an hour, that's when it's good to break the fast after the exercise, because you get a really good benefit if you're exercising at the end of your fast. If you've got a history of eating disorders, this can trigger some past things, but if you've overcome them and you've overcome them for quite some time and done different types of eating, then this may be okay. We just need to assess. Type 1 diabetes, unless supervised by your physician. We have had someone do this with supervision before. And if you're not getting your period, and lastly, underweight. So this is important to just check, and also check with Dr. Karen. If you've got any questions, she's available to answer any questions. And I don't know that your email is in the information, but I'll also add your email to the updated emails so that so if anyone has any questions, they can contact you, or you could feel free to forward to me. Oh yes, put it on the chat. Yes, I didn't think of that. Okay, so now we just want to talk a little bit about our online masterclass and what we've got. It's a gradual and supported fasting course. So as we mentioned, we go progressive. It's over 8 weeks. We really start like the first week with the 12-hour fast, and we progressively work our way up. If you guys have questions and you want to know if fasting for vitality is for you, if you're new to it or like to get help going, or you're confused and overwhelmed by all the information out there, we try to make it simple, evidence-based guidance, similar to tonight. We do this in like we basically do this in an 8-week course where we put the content on a course website, and you can access it anytime. Ideally, it shows the weeks. So ideally, we'd go week by week. And then we have a coaching call at the end of the week. So the fasting course starts on Tuesday, September 14th, so next Tuesday. And then our first coaching call is Monday, the following Monday on September 20th. So the coaching calls are live, but the other course information you can access whenever you're free. And it's about an hour content. I think I mentioned this maybe in the next slide. So if you want to feel supported on your intermittent fasting journey, maybe you've plateaued with your weight and your health and you need a breakthrough. Sometimes it's about increasing your window. Sometimes it's about changing what you eat. You want to improve these insulin resistance, diabetes, PCOS, obesity, lipid profiles, blood pressure information. You want to improve your relationship with food. We didn't put this on here, but also if you're interested in the anti-aging benefits and cellular regeneration, this is great because it does repair the body. Okay. And the details are here. So I mentioned some of this already. 8 sessions once a week. And then every Monday, I think except for November 1st, because there is a big holiday week in Mauritius at that time. So we'll probably skip one Monday because I think it'll be difficult with people going on holidays to make it up. So 7 coaching sessions. But if everyone is really interested to make it up, we'll find time. And then every Monday at 7:30, we'll have the coaching call. It's usually around 45 minutes to an hour. and it starts from September 14th and ends on November 8th. The pricing is, and then obviously payment details will be sent to you upon confirmation. So once you just put your name, email, there's a couple of details you need, then you'll be sent an email for payment details. If you're in Mauritius, then it's really easy, because I think tonight we had South Africa, US, UK, Netherlands, and Mauritius on. So if you're in Mauritius, then we can do juice or a transfer, or otherwise PayPal. So I'll send you those links.
Not only relating to weight loss, but general energy levels. We had one lady who suffered with quite bad arthritis, another with tendinitis, more mechanical kind of issues, and those were improved significantly. So I think that there is tremendous value in using intermittent fasting as a tool for health and vitality and wellness. And like I said right at the beginning, most people don't find it difficult to do. It is something that if you do it in the right way and progressively over a period of time, so that you get used to it and your body adapts to it, number one, you'll feel fantastic, lots of good physical benefits, but it's not difficult, and it's convenient, and it's flexible. So I think that if it's something that appeals to you and you feel that there will be a good benefit for you, please join us. It's a great journey, and you learn so much about not only fasting, but also nutrition, health and wellness, fitness, becoming in tune with your body. So it's a great program. And Lindsay and I worked a lot to put all the content together. So I think there's a tremendous amount of value that you can get for doing the program.
Yes, and we love doing this. Actually, this is our third time doing it. Actually, and we've done another course before, which was the Vitality one, and this is focused more on fasting, which is great. And so we just love the outcome. We love also the group camaraderie. It's quite nice on the chats as well, and when we have the calls. There's a couple of questions here. Does the course include giving us a meal plan or guidelines around ideal food to be eaten? Definitely the guidelines for sure. We give recipes. As far as a meal plan goes, we do recommend certain types of food to be eaten, but everyone has different preferences, so there's not a meal plan. I do have something that's coming from my practice, because there's a company that I will be working with to do customized meal plans, whether based on DNA or certain food preferences, but that's a separate thing that is coming. But for this one, it's about designing your ideal plate. There's lots of recipes shared. There's a lot of guidance on knowing what to eat, because a lot of people, I think there's a lot of confusion out there about, okay, when I go shopping or when I look at a recipe, how do I know it's actually the right amount of food for me? How do I know if I'm having too much protein, too little fat? So we go through a lot of that in the program so that you become very attuned to what is actually good for you. So it's not just about us saying, do this and follow us and like a lecture. It is a lot more about understanding and becoming aware of what your body needs, and we teach you how to do that in an easy way. The other question is, will there be another course after the next one? We hope so, but we don't know the timing. So we've done, we do about 2 per year, but I don't know if we're going to continue that timing. It just depends on many factors, but we hope so, that we will do another course. So now this course starts, and also we've had a lot of people who started and then maybe there was a pause, they got busy, they kind of caught back up where they could, and you'll have this access for the course for a long period of time. Are there any questions, any more questions? Or do you have any?
Comment on the food meal plan question, because I get this a lot in my practice. giving prescriptions of what to eat. So Monday, this for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, Tuesday, this to have, that to have. One can stick to those for a maximum of 2 to 3 weeks. And then you revert back to what you kind of used to eating, what you kind of used to cooking. And I never give meal plans or prescriptions to people about what you must eat. And I think this is very unique also to fasting, is that there's a lot more flexibility about what you can eat and what's good for you and what's excellent nutrition, that once you've got the knowledge and the practical ability, then you will apply those things and naturally you'll migrate to eating more healthy meals in general without having a particular meal plan prescription. So it gives you much more intuition and much more knowledge rather than saying just do this or do that.
Yeah. And I remember in some of the coaching calls we've had before, there would be questions on, okay, I had this for dinner, and then we would even comment on how to make it better so that their fast the next day goes better for them. Because sometimes, we have veggies and a protein, but there wasn't enough fat. So it's just kind of getting the proportions right to a relative extent, but each person is different. And it's also about knowing how you feel after certain meals and what you can do to shift that so you feel differently the next time, if you want to feel differently. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, I hope we covered everything. I hope everyone found some good value out of this session today. We really enjoyed speaking to all of you. Today was more like a lecture because, there's not a lot of interactivity, but we typically have more interactivity in our coaching calls. Coffee is allowed during fasting time, right? Yes, it is. So coffee, tea, cinnamon, apple cider vinegar, there's a few things that don't raise insulin. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciated your time. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us, and we'll probably send out an email tomorrow. But if you want, go ahead and join the course. We look forward to having you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Everyone take care. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.